You might not have been planning on your business's next mid-sized van being a Fiat, but this third-generation Scudo model, thanks to borrowed Stellantis Group engineering and technology, might just be good enough to change your mind. Like its design stablemates, it's easy to live with, practical, efficient and nice to drive. Step forward then for Fiat.
Fiat, a brand as Italian as a Cornetto or Pavarotti, even when it comes to vans. But maybe not this one, the mid-size Scudo, launched here in this form in 2022. It shares its design with a host of global manufacturers. Oh, and did we mention it's built in Britain? The first Fiat model ever to be so. Actually, this particular version, the all-electric e-Scudo, is made at the French Stellantis Group factory in Hordane, where all the conglomerate's mid-sized electric vans are fabricated. But the combustion engine diesel Scudos most will still choose are indeed screwed together in Blighty at the old Vauxhall factory in Luton. Brands and countries, it seems, no longer align as they once did. Nor do mid-sized Fiat vans and the platforms they sit on. Between 2016 and 2021, the Italian marque's offering in this segment was called the Talento and shared all its engineering with comparable Renault and Nissan LCVs. But the launch of this replacement model in 2022 saw a return to a chassis shared with comparable Peugeot and Citroën van models, just as it was the last time Fiat used the Scudo badge for this class of LCV between 2007 and 2016. Today, it shares engineering with comparable designs from Vauxhall and Toyota too. A benefit of this shared Stellantis Group platform is that it gives Fiat the opportunity to sell this all-electric version, an engineering package already well proven by competing sister brand models, and the finishing touch to what is now a far more complete offering in the mid-size segment. All part of a rejuvenated range of Fiat professional LCV products that should compel operators to take the brand more seriously. So how seriously should they consider this Scudo? Time to subject it to the industry's most thorough review, the car and driving road test. We're quickly getting to the point where you might feel a tinge of guilt driving a diesel-propelled van through city streets. But we're not quite at that point yet, which is why sales of diesel-powered versions of this Scudo will massively overshadow those of the all-electric variant we're trying here. Like all the other Stellantis Group and Toyota versions of this design, there's a choice of 1.5 and 2-litre black pump-fuelled units, with a couple of power outputs available for each and a choice of manual or automatic transmission. Both variants are a little on the noisy side, with roar from the tyres and wing mirrors joining the background diesel rumble. And the manual gearbox needs a firm prod through the ratios, otherwise this Scudo diesel is a very complete expression of what a modern mid-sized van should be. Issues of refinement and gear shifting will be far less bothersome to operators switching to this e-Scudo, of course. Near silent progress through the city streets propels you into a different delivery world, as the usual single-speed EV auto gearbox eases up and down the 136 horsepower electric motor's elastic rev range, which would be a calming working environment were it not for the background anxiety all EV users have in terms of operating range. Here it's rated at 205 miles for this top 75 kilowatt-hour model. It's just 142 for the more affordable 50 kilowatt-hour version. These readings are class competitive by current standards, but still not high enough for a large proportion of operators to make the switch to full battery power. So many of these people will be deciding between the two diesel units we mentioned earlier. Unless your deliveries really are light and urban bound, we'd recommend that you try and ignore the base 1.5 litre unit offered in 100 horsepower and 120 horsepower forms and available only with manual transmission. The alternative 2-litre diesel comes with manual or auto options in 145 horsepower form, or as an auto only in top 180 horsepower guise. The advantage of this bigger capacity power plant mainly lies in payload. The little 1.5 litre engine rather struggles with a weighty load in the back, especially in base 100 horsepower form. And sure enough, its official payload rating is a modest 1,109 kilos, not much more than the minimum that this electric e-Scudo can manage. Trade up to the 2-litre diesel and that figure can jump significantly to as much as 1,446 kilos. With the larger diesel fitted, this Fiat will also be able to tow 700 kilos more, up to 2.5 tonnes, which incidentally is 25% more than this Scudo's Talento predecessor model could manage. Extra torque helps here, of course. In a 2-litre, 145 horsepower manual gearbox derivative, you'll have 340 newton metres of pulling power, a 70 newton metre jump from the smaller engine. That rises to 370 newton metres with auto transmission and to 400 newton metres if you opt for the top 180 horsepower version of this unit. Thanks to that, the 2-litre diesel variant's obviously faster than the base variant too. Its rest to 62 mph time of around 12 seconds, being about 3.5 seconds faster. Yes, the smaller engine is of course slightly more economical, but unless your Scudo will habitually be used lightly laden, you'll have to work it harder, which will then cancel out that advantage. And you really don't want to have to be thrashing a diesel Scudo along, because as we mentioned earlier, at highway speeds, tyres, suspension and wind roar already create slightly more of a din than you'll find on rivals that don't share this van's design. And you don't want the engine unnecessarily adding to it. The story's rather different in this e-Scudo, of course, though in some respects not all that different at a cruise, because all the lack of an engine does is highlight the other areas just mentioned. On urban journeys, of course, there's much less to upset this electric van's general serenity, apart, of course, from the mandatory low-speed noise all EVs have to have. For deliveries in these kinds of areas, you can keep this Fiat in its most frugal eco drive mode, which holds the motor back to 81.5 horsepower, and which you'd ideally use in combination with the transmission's selectable B setting for maximum brake regeneration harvesting. When things open up, you can select the mid-level normal mode, which ups motor power to 109 horsepower. And if you want the full 136 horsepower, you'll need the final sport mode. You adjust to it all pretty quickly and to the tools on the dash. A power meter dial in the instrument cluster that replaces the usual rev counter, and a power flow display that displays close to it and can also be replicated on the centre infotainment screen. What else might you need to know? Well, perhaps that with either an EV or a diesel powertrain fitted, this Scudo rides far better than its Talento predecessor. Like its Vauxhall Vivaro, Peugeot Expert, Citroën Dispatch and Toyota Pro-Ace design stablemates, it benefits from specially designed springs that feature variable levels of stiffness to suit the level of load being carried. In addition, the shock absorbers are load sensitive and feature what the engineers call a passive system that adjusts springing and damping as required depending on the road surface. The suspension here is of course designed with heavy payloads in mind, and with half a load on board it allows for decent levels of stability. When this van's unladen, there's a bit more suspension bounce of course, but it's still more controlled than is the case with some other vans in this class. This Fiat handles the corners pretty well too, though you certainly feel the extra battery weight in this EV version. Overall though, there's a nimble feeling through the turns that this van's Talento predecessor didn't have. This Scudo, helped by a lower centre of gravity and steering that, though not especially feelsome, responds more quickly to inputs, which to some extent is what you'd expect given a reduction in weight and the fact that the front part of this chassis is the same as that used in mainstream Peugeot and Citroën family hatchbacks. The rear section is more van-like, as it needs to be in order for this model to be able to carry the heavy payloads we were talking about earlier. All of this is relative, of course. With either drivetrain, there's inevitably still plenty of body roll if, rather unwisely, you start throwing the thing about. If you can ignore both that and the rather vague steering and find yourself absolutely having to push on, you'll find that there's also more grip and traction than older generation vans of this kind would previously have offered. Is this Scudo quite as sharp and rewarding in this respect as a rival Ford Transit Custom? Well, probably not, but it's certainly a big step forward from its predecessor and is now an LCV in which you can make controlled, steady progress without necessarily overreacting on the brake pedal at the first sight of a tight bend in the road. Testers who'd found the sheer size of some other models in this segment a little daunting when dealing with narrow country lanes and squeezing through gaps in the traffic were, we found, much more easily able to acclimatise to a Scudo. The bonnet's set quite high, but the nose has a squared off shape that we found during our testing programme makes this Fiat easy to place in tight urban situations, despite a slightly lower driving position than you'd find in some rivals. A tight turning circle of between 11.3 and 12.4 metres, depending on body style, also helps in the city, as does the fact that the single available roof height, a fraction over 1.9 metres, allows this van to fit beneath high restrictive underground car park barriers and toll gates. Not everything's great with this LCV in town territory though. It would help if the door mirrors were a little bigger and if they still included the incorporated lower wide angle panel that used to be fitted on the old Talento. That old model's neat passenger sun visor mounted wide angle mirror hasn't made it through to this model either. And Fiat doesn't offer buyers here the clever permanent rear view camera, virtual rear view mirror that you can have on their larger Ducato. If you're nervous about parking, which you might be with a long wheelbase maxi model, then it's worth adding the optional Visio Park package we have here, or stretching to a variant with it fitted. This adds a rear view camera and a little overhead view monitor. Talking of options, if some of your deliveries will need to be made on slippery surfaces like those on building sites, then it's worth considering the optional Worksite pack, which gives your Scudo enhanced ground clearance and engine protection. Does it really matter what a van looks like as long as the styling's smart and modern? Well, possibly not. Fiat hasn't wasted too much time changing the front end of this one, just the usual corporate nose and bodywork designed to blend in well with whatever your company's colours are. You'll need to stretch to top spec trim to get the front fog lamps and body-coloured bumpers we have here. Your main advertising billboard space, of course, is here at the side, and there's the option of getting more of it by opting to graduate up from this standard length 4.95 metre model to the 5.3 metre long maxi version. Unfortunately, either way, there's only this single 1.9 metre roof height available. Wheel sizes are either 16 or 17 inches. You'll need to pay more for these smart alloy rims. And as usual in this class, as well as this panel van body style, there's the option of a crew cab version with a second seating row and a platform cab variant for chassis conversions. Move to the back, and as you'd expect, the vertically stacked lights flank the usual hinged rear doors with glazing and a tailgate available as options. Under the skin sit the same EMP2 underpinnings as you'll find in the Vauxhall Vivaro, Peugeot Expert, Citroën Dispatch and Toyota ProAce models that use the same design. Right, let's take a seat in the cab. Inside, the efforts made to set this Fiat apart from its Stellantis Group LCV cousins are equally cursory, but operators won't mind that given the quality of the car-like cabin, though you're not seated especially high by LCV standards. Fiat isn't offering the Ulysses MPV version of this Scudo here, but if this was a people carrier rather than a panel van, you'd be happy with the quality and design on offer, which is basically the same as you'd get in the expensive MPVs that share this design from Vauxhall, Citroën and Peugeot. Those only come in full EV form, and it's the full EV version of this Scudo that we have here, which obviously means a few cabin changes. The right-hand instrument cluster gauge, usually a rev counter, is replaced by a power meter showing energy use, and in place of the usual gear lever, there's just this little toggle switch with a mode rocker button next to it. We'd hoped that the latter change would free up a little extra knee space in front of the middle seat, but sadly not. Still, you'll be glad to have it for workmate lifts or dropping the kids off at school on the way to the office. This centre 7-inch infotainment touchscreen includes a useful power flow monitor, replicating the one that can appear between the dials in the instrument cluster in more colourful detail. This central screen comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, and it can also be had with the surround view camera system we have fitted here. Functionality's fine, with 3 physical shortcut buttons flanking each side of the monitor. And we just mentioned the further little screen in the instrument cluster, as well as the energy monitor. You can configure that to show navigation info, a digital speedo and trip data. It shows speed sign information as well. These days you'd expect a van in this class to have some sort of load-through feature, a bulkhead hatch so that long items can be pushed through into the cab from the cargo area. And sure enough, providing you avoid base trim, Fiat provides a mod you work package offering not only that, but also the facility to fold down the middle seat backrest and use your Scudo as a mobile office. There's an elasticated strap to secure your paperwork, and if you pull on the left-hand side of the backrest top, you'll find that it swivels round into an ideal position for a laptop or a tablet, so that you can stop between deliveries to check up on your emails. Alternatively, the middle part of the seat base can be raised to reveal a useful stowage area big enough for a pack of 6 half-litre bottles. Maybe your work boots and a hard hat, or perhaps valuable items you might want to keep out of sight. Finally, there's space beneath the far left passenger side of the bench, though you can only access it with the door open from the side, and here you've to work around some electrical cable work in getting to it. Getting comfortable is fairly easy thanks to plenty of seat height and wheel adjustment, and the provision of both a lumbar adjustment and a left-hand armrest. But some drivers might find the position of the wheel, pedals and seat slightly offset. You'd ideally, though, want a little more rearward seat travel than is available here. And we'd also hoped we'd see better provision for front and rearward vision. These front A-pillars are a little thick, plus the door mirrors are smaller than they were on the old Talento and no longer have a wide-angle lower section. On that previous model, another wide-angle mirror was neatly mounted on the back of the passenger sun visor for help when reversing. Sadly, that's been deleted too in the switch to this Stellantis design. None of this would matter much if Fiat was able to offer on this Scudo the permanent rear-view camera, virtual rear-view mirror you can have on the larger Ducato van, but apparently there are as yet no plans to offer that feature. Otherwise, there's very little to criticise. The cloth seat covers are smart and practical, 4 large air vents help keep the cab cool, and there's plenty of interior storage space too. In fact, there's 49 litres of it around the cabin. All models get this 5-litre lidded stowage area on top of the dashboard that's big enough to take something like an iPad, and the glove box on the passenger side is 7 litres in size, will be cooled if your Scudo has air conditioning, and can take up to 5 half-litre bottles. Annoyingly though, its lid won't stay up when raised, so using it must be a two-handed operation. It's also irritating that the 5-litre capacity of the open storage area just below is compromised by the size of the fuse box behind the fascia. It's about time that someone at Stellantis addressed that issue for right-hand drive designs. Well, as usual in a van, it's difficult to get to the lower door bin when the driver's door's shut. In this case, it's 8 litres in size and can take 2 1.5-litre bottles, so it's just as well that a smaller upper bin on the door is also provided. You get cup holders on both sides of the dashboard that can each take a half-litre bottle. In the middle of the fascia, there's this small open cubby where you can stash your mobile phone close to the 12-volt power port and USB-A socket. The designers have omitted to include an overhead sunglasses compartment or coat hooks on the B-pillars, and you can't have any sort of overhead storage shelf above the windscreen. But there are flaps on the sun visors large enough to store paperwork. This Scudo comes in 3 configurations: van, crew cab and platform cab. And there are 2 trim levels, standard and primo. As you'd expect, the LCV range pricing broadly mirrors what you'll pay for this model's identically engineered Stellantis Group mid-sized LCV cousins. The Peugeot Expert, the Citroën Dispatch and the Vauxhall Vivaro, plus the Toyota Pro-Ace, which also shares the same design. For combustion Scudo variants, at the time of this test in autumn 2022, Fiat Professional was asking prices in the £25,000 to £34,000 bracket, excluding VAT and on-the-road charges. Choose from 1.5 or 2-litre diesel units, each with a couple of output options. For this e-Scudo full electric version, think in terms of pricing in the £33,000 to £40,000 bracket after subtraction of the government's £5,000 plug-in grant. With this EV version, you'll probably want to find the premium of just over £3,000 that Fiat charges to upgrade from the base 50 kilowatt-hour battery to the longer range 75 kilowatt-hour version. Whether you choose diesel or EV, there's a £900 premium to go from this standard length body shape to the long wheelbase maxi version. But as usual in this class, no option for a higher roof height. The crew van body style requires a £3,000 to £5,000 premium, depending on variant and powertrain chosen. If you want it with a diesel engine, only the larger capacity 2-litre variants are available. As for mid-sized van rivals, well, as well as the Stellantis Group and Toyota versions of this design already mentioned, you'll be choosing between 3 other designs in this segment. There's the Mercedes Vito or the Renault-Nissan Alliance design that's sold as either a Renault Traffic or a Nissan Primastar, or the design still to be launched at the time of this test, created by the partnership formed between Ford and Volkswagen and sold as either a Ford Transit Custom or a Volkswagen Transporter. Match Fiat's relatively affordable pricing with the kind of deal you'll probably get from your local Fiat professional van franchise, and you'll probably end up finding that this Scudo is one of the most affordable choices you could make in this segment. If you're looking at this e-Scudo, then as alternatives, you'll find EV versions of all the models just mentioned. Plus, you might also want to consider 2 other similarly sized mid-shaped van EVs, the retro-style Volkswagen ID Buzz Cargo and the value-priced Maxus E Deliver 3. If you're prepared to widen that brief to include plug-in hybrids, then you might additionally include the LEVC VN5. And at the time of this test, Ford was still selling the PHEV version Transit Custom too. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is some sort of Scudo you really want, you'll need to know just how generous Fiat's been with standard specs. So let's take a look at that now. Now, starting with base standard trim, which actually gives you a bit more than the basics. So, twin sliding doors, twin and glazed rear doors, daytime running lights, remote central locking with deadlocks, and heated, powered door mirrors and hill climb assist to help you up slippery slopes. Fiat hasn't forgotten a proper full-size steel spare wheel, 12-volt sockets in both cabin and load area, and an alarm either. For the cab, there's a driver's seat with height, rake, reach and lumbar adjustment, plus a full steel bulkhead, a 2-person passenger bench, an armrest, cruise control with a speed limiter and a DAB radio with Bluetooth. You also get manual air conditioning, daytime running lights and rear parking sensors. And media connectivity is taken care of by a 7-inch centre touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. The main reason you'd want to stretch to plusher Primo spec is to get the useful ModuWork package, which gives you a fold-up middle seat, a fold-down writing table in the centre seat back, and storage under the passenger bench, plus a useful load-through flap under the outer passenger seat into the cargo area. Primo spec also upgrades you with front fog lamps, a panoramic view camera, power folding mirrors and a look pack, which gets you a body-coloured finish for the front and rear bumpers, the side rubbing strips and the exterior door handles. Most of the extra cost features you'd want are included in various optional packs. The main thing you'll probably want to do is upgrade the centre screen with navigation, which you can do with a Techno Nav pack, which for standard spec models also includes a panoramic view camera, power folding mirrors and front fog lamps. Various other optional packs are also available to add Primo spec features to standard spec models. If you'll be delivering to places like building sites, you might want to specify the optional worksite pack, which gives your Scudo enhanced ground clearance and engine protection. You can also add glazing for the rear doors and bulkhead and add reinforced rear door locks, mud flaps and a tow bar. Don't spend too much on the fancy stuff before dealing with the basics. You've really got to protect the load area if it's not to quickly become decorated with dents and scratches. This particular van has been fitted with a 9mm thick coated anti-slip wooden load floor, which you can have with or without aluminium rails. For the cargo bay, we'd also want to specify side and wheel arch liners and maybe also the retaining rails and straps you can get for the cargo area walls. On to safety features. Now, every Scudo comes with front driver and passenger airbags, ABS anti-lock brakes, traction control, ESC or electronic stability control, traffic sign recognition and hill assist that prevents the van from rolling backwards when pulling away on inclines. If you want more, you'll need to spend an extra £1,000 on the optional assist pack, which includes advanced emergency braking with forward collision warning. Plus, the pack gives you lane departure warning, blind spot alert, front parking sensors and a driver attention warning feature that advises operators to take a break after 2 hours of uninterrupted motoring. Tyre pressure monitoring is an option across the range. OK, let's get to the business end of things and check out the practicality of this Scudo's load area. Now, the main access is through these side-hinged twin rear doors and open out first to 90 degrees and then via these little yellow catches to 180 degrees. If this conventional 50-50 split rear opening doesn't suit, you could specify a one-piece tailgate, but then that'll get in the way during forklift loading. Whichever setup you prefer, the load sill height is a minimum of 544mm on this standard length model, while with the longer maxi body style, it's 600mm. The height of the door aperture is 1,220mm, while the overall width of the door opening measures in at 1,282mm. As an alternative, of course, you might choose to enter the cargo area through either of the side doors. You get one each side fitted as standard across the range. They will reveal a loading aperture with a height measurement of 1,241mm and a width of 935mm. Time to look at this cargo area in a little more detail. Now, it's the same size regardless of whether you choose this Fiat with an EV or a diesel powertrain. Here, as mentioned, we've got the standard length body shape, which offers a 5.3 cubic metre cargo capacity and 2,512mm of floor length. Go for the lengthier maxi body style and you're looking at 6.1 cubic metres and 2,862mm of floor length. Don't make your decision between these two body shapes until you've taken into account the potential extra capacity that can be freed up by the optional Moduwork load-through bulkhead. It's a standard inclusion only on the more expensive Primo trim level, and whichever body style you choose, it can add a useful 1,162mm to the overall loading length and 0.5 cubic metres to the overall carriage capacity. Let's show you how it works. You might be familiar with the idea behind this from other competing models, that of providing an opening from the cargo bay so that longer items can be poked through. With some rivals, though, the small hatch provided in the bulkhead turns out to be really only large enough to enable you to poke through narrow things like pipes. With this Scudo's ModuWorks setup, though, the aperture created is bigger, so also enabling bulkier items like ladders to edge into the cab space when necessary. Talking of bulky things, you'll need to know about payloads, which of course will vary according to your choice of engine, body style, and most significantly, gross vehicle weight, which starts from 2,695 kilos for the 1.5 diesel. It's from 3,100 for the 2-litre diesel and from 3,025 kilos for this e-Scudo. There's a broader spread of payloads this time round. The base 1.5-litre models can take only 1,109 kilos, so you might want to stretch to the 2-litre diesel, which can take up to 1,446 kilos in 145 horsepower form. With this e-Scudo, the 50 kilowatt-hour battery version can take up to 1,226 kilos, but this 75 kilowatt-hour battery model, the one most will want, is limited to 1 tonne. For all buyers, it would have been helpful if Fiat had been able to offer the overload indicator you can have on smaller Stellantis Group vans, a digital readout in the cargo bay showing if you've exceeded your permitted payload. Unfortunately, there are at present no plans to offer this feature here. Pity. What won't vary is the loading area height, which is a bit of a disappointment because with this model's Talento predecessor, you could order a separate high roof body style the Stellantis Group bean counters have decided is not worth offering this time around. If you want that, you'll have to look elsewhere in this segment, maybe at Renault's Traffic or Nissan's Primastar, though of course Fiat would rather you considered the smaller versions of its larger Ducato LCV model. All of this means the height from floor to ceiling is set at 1,397 millimetres for all variants, which is 10 millimetres more than the old standard height Talento model could offer, explaining the slight improvement in cubic capacity figures this time around. Another stat that all Scudo models share is the 1,628 millimetre load area width, which narrows to 1,258 between the wheel arches. 6 securing hooks help to keep things tied down. There are 8 on maxi models, while the full steel bulkhead we referred to earlier keeps the cabin secure and separate. As you'd expect, you can specify part trimming for the sides of this load area, and you might also want to add a wooden load floor. There's a 9mm thick floor fashioned, as in this case, from wood with an anti-slip finish. Plus, you can add aluminium rails. So, we've established that this Scudo is a very practical proposition, but what about its running costs, claimed by Fiat to be very difficult to beat in this class? Well, you'd expect this model's relatively lightweight and its efficient Stellantis Group sourced diesel engines to pay dividends here, which is how it pans out. For the most efficient possible figures, you'll need the 1.5-litre engine, which in both 100 and 120 PS forms manages up to 43.5 mpg on the WLTP combined cycle and 170 grams per kilometre of CO2. As we've remarked elsewhere in this test, though, you might actually get better real-world efficiency from the base 145 PS version of the 2-litre diesel unit, because it'll handle higher payloads so much more easily. The official WLTP figures don't necessarily reflect that, suggesting that the base 2-litre model can manage up to 38.7 mpg and 190 grams per kilometre of CO2. For completion, we'll give you the WLTP figures for the most powerful 180 horsepower 2-litre diesel model, which only comes in auto form. This top variant manages up to 38.2 mpg and 194 grams per kilometre of CO2. Of course, all the usual modern technology is in play to help this Fiat achieve such a class competitive showing. The 1.5-litre unit features optimised exhaust after treatment, an advanced selective catalytic reduction system, and an integrated NOx absorber. The 2-litre power plant has selective catalytic reduction exhaust after treatment and features a particularly low friction design for its optional 8-speed auto gearbox. Across the Scudo range, there is, of course, a stop and start system that'll cut the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. Plus, as with all modern diesel engines, the black pump fueled units use AdBlue, a urea-based solution that's injected into the exhaust gases to clean up emissions. This liquid is stored in a 22.5-litre AdBlue tank that, once full, will last you 9,320 miles, which is more than 400 miles per litre. Curiously, the AdBlue tank filler and the diesel fuel flap are retained on this e-Scudo model. Anything else you should know? Well, if overall running costs are absolutely crucial to your business and you'll be using this Fiat for mainly urban-based deliveries, you might want to talk to your dealer about the all-electric e-Scudo version of this model we're trying here, offered with a choice of 50 kilowatt-hour or 75 kilowatt-hour batteries. Now, we gave you the driving range figures for these in our driving section, 142 miles for the 50 kilowatt-hour model and 205 miles for this 75 kilowatt-hour version. You'll only get close to those figures if you keep the vehicle in its most frugal eco drive mode and regularly engage the transmission B brake regeneration setting. Plus, you'll need to keep an eye on the various dash tools provided. Pressing the little lightning button next to the centre infotainment display connects you to an energy screen, giving you three options: a statistics section, graphically showing your consumption in miles per kilowatt hour, a section to set charging times, and a power flow monitor showing you what's being charged by what in real time. The latter's replicated in smaller form on the instrument cluster screen. Within the binnacle, you'll also find a power meter with charge, eco and power sections, and just above, a little gauge showing max or eco consumption. What about charging your e-Scudo? Well, a 100 kilowatt rapid charge to 80% takes 32 minutes for the smaller battery and 45 minutes for the larger one. With Type 2 AC charging at 7 kilowatts, the respective charge times are 7 or 11 hours. Type 3 DC charging at 100 kilowatts is possible, and a built-in facility for faster 11 kilowatt AC charging is an option. Both Type 2 and Type 3 charging cables are provided, but annoyingly, you don't get one suitable for a domestic 3-pin socket. With the 7.4 kilowatt charger, you can charge overnight. What else? Well, servicing times are the same, regardless of your choice of powertrain, which means that your Scudo will need a scheduled service halt once every 2 years or 25,000 miles. The first service is required at a year or 12,500 miles. And if you want to ensure the cost of these stops don't come as a surprise, there are prepaid servicing plans available that allow you to budget in advance for these regular checks. Quite a few Fiat professional dealers also have the franchise for Iveco trucks, so they'll be better versed in the needs of commercial operators than a dealership primarily focusing on cars would be. An e-Scudo should reduce your maintenance costs because there are fewer moving parts to wear and fewer filters and fluids to change. Plus, regenerative braking should mean that brake pads and discs last longer. As you probably know, electric vehicles attract less tax too, both in terms of personal benefit and business assets. What about warranty cover? Well, Fiat includes its usual 3-year, 60,000-mile warranty, which is an unremarkable package, but it can be extended up to 5 years with Fiat Professional's useful 555 package, which also includes servicing and roadside assistance cover for the same period. If you can negotiate this into your upfront deal, it'll give this Scudo a useful advantage over its fellow Stellantis Group designs in this segment. The e-Scudo's battery is covered by its own separate 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty. Lots of brands remain in the van segment, but these days there are only 3 actual players. The Nissan-Renault alliance, which in future will include Mercedes, the Ford and Volkswagen partnership, and, as in this case, the Stellantis Group. It certainly makes things simpler. In any van segment, you simply choose the design that fits your company's needs most precisely, then decide which of the available badge-engineered versions will offer you the best deal and service backup. And on that basis, this Fiat Scudo looks a very reasonable proposition. No, Fiat Professional doesn't have the largest network of dealers, but UK coverage is wide and quite a few of the franchises also look after Iveco trucks, which means that they'll be better versed in looking after the needs of commercial operators than a brand primarily concerned with cars would be. Out-of-hours servicing, courtesy vehicle provision, all these things might well end up being just that little bit easier. Asking questions about all these things is of course crucial when making your final choice, and here Fiat Professional reckons it has your needs covered. Assuming of course you're sold on the product it sells. You might be. The practicality stats add up, the diesel engines are properly efficient, and the charging and range figures for this e-Scudo are extremely class competitive. We'd like refinement to be better, and of course this full battery model would be easier to countenance if it was more affordable and went further between charges. But it matches the class standard, and if you can't stretch to it, you'll probably get a sharp deal from Fiat on the continuing diesel version. That much we'd expect from Fiat, and this much we'd expect from a Stellantis Group design. And when it comes to what you'd expect from a mid-size van, you might find that this one will meet your company's needs more comprehensively than any similarly sized LCV from this brand has ever managed before.